The morning everything changed started like any other bright winter day in our quiet suburban neighborhood. The air was cold enough that every breath turned into a white cloud. The frost clung to the blades of grass like glass powder, and sunlight spilled across my front lawn so sharply it looked like the ground itself was glowing. I walked out wearing my usual checkered red and black flannel shirt, boots crunching through the frost, expecting nothing more than to check on a small corner patch of soil I had been preparing for spring planting. I didn't expect trouble. I didn't expect yelling. I definitely didn't expect the homeowner association to turn my lawn into a battlefield. But then again, I hadn't accounted for Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, the most power-hungry HOA president the neighborhood had ever endured. The man had a talent. He could turn a blade of grass into a federal crisis. I had barely stepped off my porch when I saw him marching, no, stomping down my walkway. His enormous body bounced with each impact, his bright pink shirt so tight it looked like it was seconds away from surrendering under pressure, and his face already red before he even started yelling. Sweat glistened across his forehead despite the freezing temperature. His black dress pants strained against his legs as he huffed and puffed, each exhale shooting steam into the cold air like a locomotive under stress. And behind him, two male HOA volunteers followed, each of them carrying clipboards like they were backup dancers in a very poorly choreographed performance. I set my coffee mug on the porch railing. "Morning, Mark," I said, already regretting opening my mouth. He stopped directly in front of me and inhaled deeply, so deeply it visibly lifted his giant stomach. "This," he began, pointing dramatically at my lawn, his arm jiggling with the force, "this is now under HOA control." I blinked. "My lawn, yes, your lawn," he screamed, sweating harder. "This area has been declared abandoned property." I looked at the perfectly maintained grass, the tidy edges, the freshly trimmed shrubs, the frost sparkling like diamonds in the sun. "Abandoned," I repeated. "By who, my evil twin?" His eye twitched. "You have failed to add winter decorations." I stared at him. "Winter decorations?" "Yes," he bellowed. "According to a new HOA subsection, all front LAWNs must display seasonal maintenance indicators during winter MONTHS. "What indicators?" He lifted a flimsy printed page from his clipboard. "Winter land activity markers." "That sounds fake, Mark." He puffed his chest out, making his shirt stretch even tighter. "It is not fake, it is a rule that begins." He checked the corner of the paper. "Today," I sighed. "You created a rule this morning, didn't you?" His whole body trembled with indignation. "It was drafted at 3 a.m., Mark, that's not a good thing," one of the volunteers whispered. "He texted us at 2:50 a.m. asking if snow counts as decoration." I tried not to laugh. "So you're declaring my lawn abandoned because I didn't put plastic candy canes out?" "Correct," he yelled. "And because it is abandoned property, the HOA now controls it, so you think you can take my lawn?" "Yes." "Because I didn't decorate?" "Yes." "Because you do not show community spirit," he shouted, waving his arms so wildly his shirt lifted and exposed a pale patch of stomach. I took a slow breath. "Mark, I own this lawn." "Not anymore," he shot back. "The HOA has declared it under temporary acquisition. You can't acquire my land." "I can, you can't." "Yes, I can." "No, you can't." He stomped so hard the frost shook. "I am the authority here. I make the rules." "Mark, this is illegal." "It's not illegal." He shouted, sweating so hard droplets began sliding down his cheeks. It's community appropriation. That's still illegal." He turned to his volunteers. "Right, HIMUP." They hesitated. "For what?" "For failure to properly utilize lawn space during winter." I exhaled slowly. "Mark, this is insane." "Insane?" he echoed, voice cracking. "Insane? No, what's insane is you thinking you can defy the HOA." He pointed to the grass. "This area now belongs to US. We will begin installing approved decor today." I blinked. "Installing what?" "Synthetic holiday spirit modules." "You mean plastic Christmas gnomes?" "Yes." I rubbed my forehead. "Mark, if you put anything on my property, I'm calling the city." He froze. The sweat dripped off his chin. The volunteers glanced nervously at each other. Mark's eyes narrowed into tiny, furious slits. "The city will not help you." "We'll see." I said. "No, we won't see," he screamed. "We will do what I say." "You're going to lose this fight, Mark." "No, I won't." He stomped closer, invading my space. "The HOA has power, I have power, and you are nothing." I stepped back and smiled. "Funny thing, Mark." "What?" He barked. "You should have checked whose number I have saved in my phone." "Who?" he demanded. "Someone who really loves this neighborhood," he scoffed. "WHO, your brother, your cousin, YOUR." "The mayor," I said quietly, the color drained from his face. Immediately replaced by an even deeper red. "The mayor," he squeaked. "Yes, the mayor is not coming here," he screamed. "He is," I said, "because I already called him." Mark's jaw dropped so far it nearly hit his enormous belly. You can't call the mayor," he sputtered. "That's not fair." "Fair," I repeated. "Mark, you tried to steal my lawn." He pointed at me with a shaking, sweaty hand. "I will fix this," he vowed. "I will handle the mayor." I raised an eyebrow. He turned to run, slipped on his own melted sweat patch of ice, and face planted into my grass. And as he lay there groaning, I noticed something. This fight was far from over, but Mark didn't know what was coming next, because the mayor wasn't just coming to visit. The mayor was coming with paperwork. By the time the sun had climbed fully over the rooftops and the cold morning haze lifted, I could feel the tension rippling through the neighborhood like static. I stood on my porch, flannel shirt brushing against the railing, arms folded as I watched two things happen simultaneously. First, neighbors began stepping onto their driveways, pretending to get the mail, pretending to shovel non-existent snow, pretending to adjust Christmas lights, when really they were gathering for a show. Second, Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, was pacing back and forth across MY lawn like an enraged flamingo, screaming into his phone so loudly the sound bounced off nearby garage doors. Steam puffed from his mouth, sweat streamed down his red face as if he were standing under a heat lamp instead of a winter sun, and every frantic stomp he made left deeper footprints in my frost-covered grass. "What do you mean he called the mayor?" he barked into the phone, jabbing a sausage-like finger into the air. "HES not allowed to call the mayor, I authorize it," he paused. "Because I am the HOA, that's WHY." He paced faster, pant legs swishing loudly, shirt buttons trembling under pressure with each labored breath. "No, this is not over, I will fix this, I will handle the mayor personally." Sweat dripped off his chin and hit the frost, melting tiny holes everywhere he turned. The two HOA volunteers from earlier hovered nervously several feet behind him, whispering to each other like frightened schoolkids trying to decide whether to stay or bolt. One whispered, "He's been calling everyone for the last 30 minutes, even the landscaping guy." The other replied, "He threatened to revoke my mailbox privileges if I didn't back his claim." I took another sip of coffee. "Morning, gentlemen," I said. They both jumped. But Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, whirled around with such speed that his belly kept moving half a second after the rest of him stopped. "You," he screamed, pointing at me with a trembling, sweat-slicked hand. "Don't you dare talk to my staff, they are under HOA protection." "Your staff?" I repeated. "Pretty sure they just volunteer to pass out newsletters." "No," he barked. "They are now official enforcement observers," one volunteer whispered. "He told us 5 minutes ago." Across the street, garage doors were opening one by one. Male neighbors stepped out holding coffee cups, sports newspapers, power tools they didn't even turn on, anything to give them an excuse to watch. They weren't subtle, they didn't need to be, because this wasn't just drama anymore. This was the kind of event people would talk about for the next 5 years. Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, resumed his pacing, waving his arms so aggressively that his shirt flapped over the top of his waistband. "Listen to me," he yelled into his phone. "This is an emergency HOA situation. The mayor is meddling in private community business." There was a long pause, his eyes bulged. "Yes, I know the mayor is the mayor, but still he can't just mayor his way in here." Another pause. Yes, I know how mayors work, but this is different." The line must have disconnected because he suddenly began stomping toward me again. "You think you're smart, don't you?" he said through heaving breaths, face shining with sweat under the sun. "You think calling HIM was clever." "Not clever," I said. "Necessary. Necessary." He screamed so loudly a flock of birds abandoned a nearby tree. "No, what is necessary is you respecting HOA authority." "Mark," I said calmly, "you tried to take my lawn." "It was abandoned," he shouted. "Look at it, no decorations, no markings, no signs of seasonal activity. It's grass," I said. "Grass doesn't celebrate holidays." He threw both hands in the air like I had personally offended the laws of physics. "That is not the point." At that exact moment, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows turned the corner and drove slowly down the street. A hush fell over every driveway, neighbors straightened up, conversations died mid-sentence. Even the wind seemed to pause because everyone knew who rode in that car, the mayor. The SUV pulled up in front of my house. The engine shut off. The door opened and out stepped Mayor Daniels, a tall, silver-haired man with a commanding posture, tailored coat, and an air of calm authority that instantly made the entire street feel smaller. He shut the door, adjusted his coat collar, and looked around the neighborhood with the expression of a man who was already disappointed and hadn't yet spoken a word. I stepped forward to greet him. "Morning, Mayor," he shook my hand. "You said this was urgent, show me." Before I could say anything else, Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, came barreling across my yard so fast he nearly tripped over his own shoes. "Mr. Mayor," he boomed, sweat flying off his forehead. "You are interfering in HOA matters." The mayor lifted an eyebrow. "And you are trespassing on private property." Mark froze. I am not trespassing." "I am supervising." "Supervising what?" the mayor asked. "Abandoned property," Mark screamed, pointing wildly at my perfectly maintained lawn. The mayor stared at the grass, then at me, then at the volunteers hiding behind a shrub. "Abandoned," Mark nodded vigorously, belly bouncing. Yes, it is empty, no holiday spirit, no winter decor, no whatever." The mayor crossed his arms. "And that makes it abandoned?" "Yes," Mark replied proudly, sweat dripping onto the frost. Mayor looked at him with an expression only a politician can muster, the expression that said, "You have made a mistake so large I must pause to comprehend it." "Mark," the mayor said slowly, "you cannot see someone's lawn because it lacks plastic decorations." "Yes, I can," Mark insisted, stamping his foot. "Because I am the HOA," the mayor sighed. "Not anymore," Mark blinked. "WH what?" But before the mayor could explain, another car turned the corner, a blue one with a county seal. And I realized something big was about to unfold. Something Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, wasn't prepared for. The blue county vehicle rolled slowly into the neighborhood, its tires crunching over the frost-covered street as sunlight glinted off the official seal on the door. You could have heard a pin drop across the entire block. Every neighbor who had been pretending to check mail or shovel snow suddenly froze mid-motion. Even the mayor, who stood tall with his hands clasped behind his back, shifted slightly as the county car approached. And right in the middle of all of it stood Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, who looked like he might explode from a combination of panic, rage, and overheating. His pink shirt was already plastered to his torso from sweat, steam rose from his shoulders in the freezing air, and his face had turned the deepest shade of crimson I had ever seen. When the county inspector stepped out, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a dark overcoat carrying a folder and a metal clipboard, the entire mood shifted. He closed the car door softly but with the kind of authority that made everyone stand straighter. "Morning," he said, nodding to the mayor. "Got your message." The mayor nodded back. "We have a situation." The inspector glanced at me first, then at my lawn, then at the cluster of terrified volunteers hiding behind a mailbox. Finally, his gaze landed on Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, who immediately tried to wipe his sweaty face with his sleeve only to smear it worse. "You don't need to be here," Mark shouted before the inspector could speak. "This is a private HOA matter." The inspector raised an eyebrow. According to the mayor, the HOA attempted to reassign private land without county approval. Mark shook his head so hard his jowls wobbled. "I did no such thing." The inspector opened his folder. "Says here you labeled the homeowner's lawn as abandoned property and attempted to seize it on behalf of the HOA. "Yes, no, wait, it's complicated," Mark sputtered. "He didn't decorate, it was empty." The inspector blinked. "So? Because he didn't put decorations on his lawn, you claimed it was abandoned." Mark nodded vigorously. "Exactly." The inspector stared at him for a long, painful moment. "That," he said carefully, "is not how abandonment works." "But I am the HOA," Mark screamed. "I make the rules." "Not without county approval for land seizure," the inspector replied, "and certainly not overnight based on decorations." The mayor stepped forward. "Mark, this has gone too far." But Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, wasn't done spiraling. "No," he yelled, waving his arms so wildly that one of his shirt buttons shot off and disappeared into the snow. "No, I will not be embarrassed on my own street." The inspector opened his metal clipboard and began writing. "Mark Rudd," Mark flinched. "You are being cited for unauthorized land designation, wrongful HOA enforcement, and attempted property seizure." Mark's mouth fell open. "What? No, no, no." He staggered backward, nearly slipping again. "You can't cite me, I am the president." The mayor shook his head. "You were the president until you overstepped your authority." "I did not overstep anything," Mark yelled, though his voice was thinning from exhaustion. Sweat poured down his temples and froze instantly at the edges. "This is all his fault." He jabbed a thick, trembling finger at me. He caused this. He called you. He called the mayor. I lifted my hand calmly. "Mark, you tried to take my lawn." "Because it was abandoned," he screamed. The county inspector turned another page in his folder. "There's also the issue of the 3 a.m. policy change." Mark's eyes went wide. "How do you know about that?" "Because," the inspector said, "policy changes must be submitted to the county within 3 days. You sent yours at 3:08 a.m. today. It lacks signatures, board approval, and legal review." Mark gulped loudly. The board trusts me." The mayor shook his head slowly. "No, they don't," the inspector continued. "You also attempted to form an HOA enforcement unit without licensing, background checks, or any concept of legality." Mark clasped his hands dramatically. "They were volunteers, faithful volunteers. One of the volunteers yelled from the driveway, 'You told us we were doing landscaping.' The other said, 'Yeah, you didn't say anything about seizing lawns.'" Mark whirled around. "Traitors, both of you," neighbors snickered. The mayor coughed into his hand to hide a smirk. The inspector wrote faster, but then the inspector took a slow step toward the lawn, examining the soil, the frost, the trimmed edges, the clean-cut grass. He looked impressed. "This lawn," he said plainly, "is one of the best-maintained properties on the block." "Yes," one of the neighbors shouted from across the street. "He mows every week," another yelled, "and he trims the edges better than the city crews." A third added, "Mark never even touched a lawnmower." I have a mower, Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight, bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, screamed. I just don't use it, the inspector closed his folder. Mark Rudd, this is the most blatant misuse of HOA power I've seen this year. Mark's knees wobbled. No, no, this isn't happening. It is, the mayor said, and the county will finalize its ruling today. Mark took a shaky step backward. You can't do this, you can't remove MY authority. We're not removing it, the mayor replied. You already destroyed it. Suddenly, Mark lunged toward the lawn, dropping to his knees in the snow, scooping handfuls of grass and frost into the air as he wailed. This is HOA land, this is HOA land, this is HOA. His voice cracked as he dissolved into high-pitched gasps. I am the president, the inspector looked at me. Call your lawyer, he said. This is about to become official, and Mark looked up at me with wide, shaking eyes filled with horror, because he finally realized he had lost control. And worse, the biggest consequence hadn't even been delivered yet. The moment the county inspector told me to call my lawyer, a shift ran through the entire neighborhood, a subtle but unmistakable tightening, like everyone holding their breath at the same time. The cold winter sun glared over the rooftops, reflecting off the snow-covered lawns and casting sharp shadows across the street. The crisp air carried every word, every gasp, every muttered comment from the gathering crowd of men who had slowly formed a semicircle around my lawn. And right in the middle of all of it, on his knees in the frost, sat Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight, bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, melting the snow beneath him with the sheer heat of his panic. Steam curled upward from his shirt in the freezing air, and sweat dripped off his chin in fat droplets that sizzled as they hit the frost. He shook his head violently, sending sweat flying like mist. No, this is wrong, you can't do this, he cried, clawing at the ground as if he could physically hold on to authority with his fingertips. I am the HOA, I am the final decision. His voice cracked horribly, echoing through the quiet block. The county inspector turned slightly, speaking into his radio. Begin formal review, prepare documentation for immediate suspension of neighborhood authority privileges. The mayor stepped forward, hands behind his back. His voice was calm but iron steady. Mark, you left us no choice. Suddenly, Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight, bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, lurched to his feet with surprising speed for his size. His belly bounced with each movement, and his shirt clung tighter as he stumbled forward, pointing at me with a shaking, greasy finger. You, he spat, you did this, you ruined everything, you went above the HOA, you called the mayor, you broke the chain of command. I raised an eyebrow. The chain of command? Yes, he screamed. The HOA is a pyramid of power and I am the apex. At that, one of the neighbors snorted loudly. Another muttered, more like the whole pyramid. Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight, bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, spun toward them. Who said that? His voice cracked again, strained from shouting. The mayor lifted a hand. Mark, calm down. No, he yelled, stomping so hard his foot sank into the snow up to his ankle. Don't tell me to calm down, this is a coup. A betrayal of the HOA Constitution. The inspector looked confused. You have a constitution, Mark puffed out his chest, which pushed his shirt buttons to their absolute breaking point. Yes, I wrote it myself, the inspector scribbled something on his clipboard. Not helping your case, Mark gasped like he had been stabbed. You can't take this from me, I built this HOA, I sacrificed for this HOA, the mayor interrupted him. Mark, do you know why the county is here? Mark blinked. Because he called you. He screamed, pointing at me again. He went behind him, my back. No, the mayor said. The county is here because I called them. The entire neighborhood murmured in shock. Even I didn't expect that. Mark froze mid-breath, steam rising from his sweaty pink shirt. You, he whispered. Yes, the mayor said simply. Because over the last 12 months your HOA has filed more complaints, more fines, and more unauthorized rule changes than every other HOA in the district combined. Mark's jaw dropped so low it nearly rested on his belly. That's a good thing. It's a sign of mismanagement, the inspector said, flipping a page. Borderline harassment in several cases. Mark's face turned purple. Those were justified, all of them. I run a strict community. No, the mayor said gently. You run a hostile community. The words hit him like a physical blow. His body swayed, his belly jiggling from the impact. He wheezed, wiping sweat from his lips. No, no. The HOA is order, structure, rules. I am the rules. Before the mayor could respond, another car turned the corner, not a county vehicle, not police. A silver sedan with a city emblem on the door. When it stopped, a man in a suit stepped out, a city zoning attorney. Mark's knees buckled. No, not him. Why is he here? He's here, the mayor said, because your new rule classifying lawns as abandoned violates city planning codes. The attorney opened his briefcase. Mr. Rudd, per city law, falsely designating private property as public domain is subject to civil penalties, mandatory suspension, and potential removal from HOA leadership. Mark shrieked, an actual shriek, high-pitched and desperate. No, this is a witch hunt. You can't remove me. I am THEHOA, the inspector stepped closer. Not anymore. Mark staggered backward, tripping over his own feet and landing on his backside with a loud thud that shook the frost. He clawed at the snow, gripping fistfuls of ice that melted instantly under his overheated palms. His face crumpled, not with regret but with fear. "You caw," he whispered. "You can't do this. What happens to the HOA without me?" The mayor glanced around the neighborhood. "It gets better." That sentence broke him. Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, let out a scream of pure devastation, the loudest yet. "No!" But his meltdown was interrupted by something none of us expected. The city attorney pulled out a second document. Additionally, he said, the mayor has requested that the homeowner be compensated for emotional distress, wrongful interference, and attempted land seizure. Mark's eyes widened. "Compensated? He gets money?" "Yes," the mayor said, "because you crossed a line." Mark collapsed completely, face pressed into the snow, sweat melting a crater beneath him. No," he sobbed. The inspector leaned toward me. "We'll need your statement shortly." And as I nodded, something else happened. A TV news van turned onto the street. Because this story, it wasn't going to stay small anymore. The news van rolling onto our street might as well have been a bomb going off. Because the entire neighborhood erupted into a low wave of male voices, shuffling boots, and nervous laughter as everyone realized what was happening. This was no longer an HOA dispute, no longer a county citation, no longer a mayoral intervention. This had officially become the kind of public humiliation that would follow Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants for the rest of his life. The sunlight hit the blue and white news van perfectly, reflecting across its windshield as the reporter stepped out. A calm, middle-aged man in a heavy winter coat, camera operator behind him adjusting the lens as he approached the mayor. A dozen neighbors drifted closer, pretending they weren't invading the scene, but the mayor didn't mind. He looked almost relieved that external eyes were here to witness everything. I stood at the center of the yard, flannel shirt brushing lightly in the cold breeze, watching as the reporter introduced himself to the mayor and the county inspector. Then the camera swung around. Toward Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, who was still sprawled in the snow like a felled walrus, panting heavily, sweat pooling beneath him and instantly melting away the frost. He looked up, eyes wide with panic, face flushed a deep, unnatural red. "No cameras," he squeaked, scrambling backward on his palms, belly dragging across the snow like a sled. No, you can't film this," the reporter raised an eyebrow. "Sir, this is a public street." Mark's breathing accelerated. He wiped his sweaty forehead with both hands, leaving streaks of melted snow and smeared dirt. "I forbid it, as the HOA president, former president," the mayor corrected. Mark screamed at the sky, "I will never accept that title," but reality didn't care. The reporter gestured toward me. "You're the homeowner. The one affected by these HOA decisions." "Yes," I said, happy to explain what happened. As I began giving a calm, factual interview about the lawn seizure attempt, the 3 a.m. rulemaking, and the harassment leading up to this moment, Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, crawled desperately toward the county inspector. "Stop him," he begged. "HES lying, ITS all lies." The inspector didn't even look at him. "He isn't lying, Mark, you are." That sentence hollowed Mark out. I could see it in the way his shoulders sagged, his belly deflated slightly, and his expression collapsed into something like defeated disbelief. But the news camera was still rolling. The reporter turned next to the mayor. "Sir, is it true the city is issuing penalties against this HOA leader?" The mayor nodded with quiet certainty. "Yes. The city has been reviewing complaints for months. Today simply accelerated the process." Mark let out a strangled gasp. "MONTHS," the mayor turned to him. "Mark, you've weaponized this HOA for over a year. There were more grievances filed under your leadership than any neighborhood in the region." Mark clawed at the snow. But those were valid grievances. "Fines for mailbox color?" the mayor asked. Mark puffed out his chest. "Mailboxes set a tone. Fines for how loudly a dog blinked." "It was an aggressive blink." "Fines for unapproved facial hair growth rate." "He shaved too slowly." Neighbors burst out laughing. The reporter captured every second. But the moment that sealed Mark's fate came when the city attorney unfolded a final piece of paperwork, gold seal, official lettering, legal weight behind every word. "This," he said loudly enough for the entire street to hear, "is an order mandating that the Homeowner Association hold an emergency election for new leadership. Effective immediately, Mark Rudd is removed from all authority positions pending investigation." There was silence, then a sound people would talk about for years: a moan. A long, exhausted, defeated moan as Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight, bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, collapsed face first into the snow and lay there motionless except for the rise and fall of his massive shoulders as he sobbed loudly into the ice. His pink shirt clung to him like a second skin, soaked completely through with sweat. The news camera zoomed in. The reporter asked the mayor, "What happens now?" The mayor looked directly into the camera. "We begin rebuilding trust," he said, "and we stop allowing people like this to control our communities." Behind him, Mark let out a high-pitched wail. "I am the HOA, you can't take away the HOA." Alal, his voice cracked, then died, because deeper than embarrassment, deeper than anger, deeper than sweat-soaked humiliation, he finally understood he'd lost. The inspector approached me quietly. "Your lawn is legally yours permanently. The county will file the paperwork today." I nodded. "Thank you." And he added, "You'll be notified regarding potential compensation." I smirked. "That's a nice bonus." The mayor shook my hand. "You handled this well." "I just wanted to be left alone," I said. The mayor smiled. "That's usually how these things start." The news van drove off first, then the city car, then the county inspector's vehicle. Neighbors slowly returned to their homes, still laughing, still replaying every detail. And soon, it was just me standing on my lawn, sunlight warming my flannel shirt, watching the last of the tire tracks fade behind the retreating cars. Only one person lingered. Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, still lying in the snow, sobbing softly, steam rising from his overheated skin. I stepped closer. "Mark," he didn't move. "You should go home," I said. His voice was barely a whisper. "I don't have power anymore. That's how consequences work," I replied. He whimpered. "Who am I now without the HOA?" I shrugged. "A neighbor." He groaned into the melting snow, and with that I walked back to my porch, finally able to breathe again because the fight was over. My lawn was mine. The HOA had fallen, and Mark would never forget the day the mayor stepped in.